Hi, this is part of my introductory lecture to ECGs, and so we'll go ahead and get started with this one. All right, so if you guys remember when we're talking about the heart generally, the heart is the mechanical pump that pumps blood throughout the body. And for those pumps to be effective, they need to contract in rhythm in order to get blood where it needs to go. So when we look at the heart, and this, you guys know this, it's a little something like this here, and there's 4 different chambers in the heart. So we have the right atria here, right ventricle, left atria, and the left ventricle. So as we've discussed previously, blood that's leaving the right ventricle gets pumped into the pulmonary circulation, and blood that's pumped from the left ventricle goes out into the systemic circulation. And that is pretty much what the heart strives to do. So there's some characteristics of cardiac myocytes, or heart cells, that allow them to be really effective in what they do. And so if you look at cardiac cells, this dot here is the nucleus. If you look at a chain of cardiac cells, it's going to look something like this. And if you guys remember, one thing that differentiates cardiac muscle cells from the other types of muscle cells, your skeletal muscle cells and your smooth muscle cells, is the presence of gap junctions. What gap junctions allow is for cardiac cells to communicate directly with each other. So cardiac cells, they depolarize spontaneously, meaning they don't need some kind of external influence to make them depolarize. So that's one thing, gap junctions that make these cardiac cells super unique. And so what an ECG does, an electrocardiogram, also called an EKG, but we'll say ECG because that's a little bit more commonly used. What that does, it measures the direction of electrical activity as it passes through these cardiac myocytes. So let's just say, for an example, we introduce some kind of electrical stimulus to this end of the cardiac cell. So we'll go ahead and draw that in green. And you guys should also be drawing this, on your papers that I passed out. So draw this with me. If we introduce an electrical current here, the cardiac cells are going to depolarize in this direction. So as we've talked a lot about previously, the membrane potential changes, and that's what propagates or sends the signal down this row of cardiac myocytes here. So what happens with an EKG? We place electrodes on the ends of the muscle tissue in around the heart so we can pick up the electrical activity. And that's what electrodes do. They just pick up electrical activity. And so you'll have a negative and positive electrode. And depending on which way the electrical charge is moving relative to the electrode, that's going to cause either a positive or a negative deflection on an EKG. So you guys have probably seen this in movies, TV shows. You have the beep. Somebody flatlines, that means they're dead. But you'll see something along these lines here. And that'll be on a strip that's continuously run if somebody's in an intensive care or hospital situation. So what happens here, as electrical charges move in certain directions, it's going to pick up different deflections. So each electrical event that happens in the heart gets picked up on this ECG. And we can analyze the rhythm, and we can pick up certain pathologies and really clinically important things as well. So that's just a brief sample of how I introduce the subject of ECGs. We go into talking about how the electrical activity moves through the entire heart. We draw it out. I'll have the students draw it out with me. And we take our time getting through this because it can be pretty complicated. So thanks for listening, guys, and any feedback would be appreciated. Thank you.